What happens when Hollywood's most respected icon walks onto a morning talk show expecting a simple conversation about his legacy, only to be blindsided by a host who decides to turn the interview into a personal attack? In just 45 seconds, one dismissive comment would spark a confrontation so intense that it would end with a legend walking off the set, leaving the entire panel speechless and a host scrambling to save face. The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studio in Times Square. Clint Eastwood, the 80-something-year-old director and actor whose career had spanned over 6 decades, was scheduled to appear on the show to discuss his latest film project. The segment was supposed to be straightforward, a celebration of his incredible body of work, his contributions to cinema, and perhaps some light conversation about his creative process. Lara Spencer sat at the desk, flanked by Michael Strawn and Robin Roberts. The energy in the studio was upbeat as they came back from a commercial break. The audience applauded as Clint walked onto the set, dressed simply in a dark blazer and button-down shirt. He waved briefly to the crowd and took his seat across from the panel. "Welcome back," Lara said, her smile wide, but somehow not reaching her eyes. "We are so thrilled to have the legendary Clint Eastwood with us this morning." Clint nodded. "Thank you for having me." Robin Roberts leaned forward. "Clint, your new film has been getting incredible early reviews. Can you tell us a bit about what drew you to this particular story?" Before Clint could answer, Lara cut in. "Actually, before we get to that, I have to ask. You're how old now? 80-something? When are you going to finally retire? I mean, don't you think it's time to let the younger generation take over?" The question landed like a brick. Michael Strawn shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Robin Roberts' smile faltered. The studio audience went quiet. Clint's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. "I don't think age should determine when someone stops doing what they love. As long as I have stories to tell and the ability to tell them, I'll keep working." Lara laughed, but it was a sharp sound. "But don't you think you're kind of out of touch with what modern audiences want? I mean, your films are very old-fashioned. They don't really connect with younger viewers anymore." "Actually, Lara," Michael interjected, "his last film did really well with—" "I'm just being honest," Lara interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "I think people appreciate honesty. Clint, you have to admit, the industry has moved past your style of filmmaking." Clint's jaw tightened slightly. "I disagree. Good storytelling is timeless. It doesn't matter if you're 25 or 85. If you have something meaningful to say, people will listen." "But do they, though?" Lara pressed, leaning back in her chair with an expression that could only be described as smug. "Your last few films haven't exactly been box office smashes. Maybe that's the market telling you something." Robin Roberts tried to steer the conversation. "I think what's remarkable about your career, Clint, is the consistency and quality—" No, let him answer," Lara said, cutting Robin off again. "I want to know if he really thinks he's still relevant in today's Hollywood. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like the industry has moved on. Superhero movies, franchises, streaming content. That's what people want now. Not," she paused dramatically, "whatever it is you're making." The dismissiveness in her tone was unmistakable. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Clint remained calm, though his eyes had taken on a sharper focus. "The industry is always changing. It always has been. When I started out, they said television would kill movies. Then it was home video. Then the internet. But good stories survive all of that. They transcend trends." "That's a nice philosophy," Lara said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "But philosophy doesn't sell tickets. And your recent films, well, let's just say they haven't exactly set the box office on fire." "Lara," Michael Strawn interjected, his discomfort now visible. "I don't think we need to—" "What?" Lara turned to Michael. "We're having a conversation. This is what conversations look like. Honest, direct, Real. This isn't a conversation, Clint said quietly. A conversation involves two people speaking with each other. What you're doing is speaking at me. There's a difference. I'm asking you questions, Lara insisted. That's literally my job. Your job is to interview people. Yes, Clint agreed. But there's a way to do that with respect. You can ask challenging questions without being insulting. You can explore difficult topics without being condescending. What you're doing is neither challenging nor insightful. It's just mean. Lara's face reddened. Mean? I'm being mean? I'm trying to have a real conversation about the state of your career. No, you're not, Clint said, his voice steady. You're trying to embarrass me. You're trying to create a moment where you look tough and I look foolish. But that's not going to happen. I think you're being paranoid, Lara said, but there was a defensive edge to her voice now. Am I? Clint leaned forward slightly. Then explain to me why every single question you've asked has been framed negatively. Why you focused entirely on age, on box office numbers, on suggesting I'm irrelevant. If you wanted a real conversation about my career, you would have asked about the work itself, about the process, about what drives me creatively. But you haven't asked any of those things. Robin Roberts nodded slowly, and it was clear she agreed with his assessment. Clint makes a good point. Maybe we can shift gears and talk about... I don't need you defending him, Robin, Lara snapped, then seemed to catch herself. What I mean is, I'm conducting this interview. Then conduct it properly, Clint said. Ask real questions. Show some genuine curiosity about something other than my age and box office receipts. Lara's jaw tightened. Fine. Let's talk about your directing style. Some critics have said it's become formulaic, that you're essentially making the same film over and over. What do you say to that? I'd say that's their opinion, Clint replied. Critics are entitled to their views, but I make the films I want to make. I tell the stories that interest me. If some people think that's formulaic, that's their prerogative. So you don't care what critics think? Lara asked, and there was a triumphant note in her voice, as if she'd caught him in something. I didn't say that, Clint clarified. I said I make the films I want to make. Of course I pay attention to criticism. Any artist does. But I don't let it dictate what I do. There's a difference between being informed by criticism and being controlled by it. That sounds like a convenient way to ignore when people tell you your work isn't good, Lara said. The studio went very quiet. That last comment had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Clint stared at her for a long moment. You think my work isn't good? It wasn't a question. It was a statement, hanging in the air between them. I didn't say that, Lara backtracked quickly. You just did, Clint said. You implied that critics who don't like my work are right, and I'm just too stubborn or too arrogant to listen. I think you're putting words in my mouth, Lara said. No, I'm just pointing out what you actually said, Clint replied, which is that my work isn't good, and I'm too proud to admit it. That's what you meant, isn't it? Lara opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since the interview began, she seemed uncertain. Michael Strawn seized the opportunity. What I think is amazing about your career, Clint, is the longevity. Not many people can say they've been relevant for over 60 years. Thank you, Michael, Clint said, but he didn't take his eyes off Lara. But I'd like to hear what Lara has to say. She started this conversation. Let's finish it. There's nothing to finish, Lara said, trying to regain her composure. I think we've covered this topic. Have we? Clint asked. Because it seems to me like you wanted to make a point about my career, my relevance, my worthiness to still be making films. And now that I'm pushing back, you want to move on. That's convenient. I'm not trying to be convenient, Lara said. I'm trying to do my job. Then do it, Clint challenged. Ask me a real question, not a setup, not a gotcha. a genuine question about my work, my process, anything that shows you actually care about the answers. The tension in the studio was now almost unbearable. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of this increasingly uncomfortable exchange. Robin Roberts looked at Lara, silently pleading with her to back down, to steer the interview in a different direction. But Lara's pride wouldn't let her. "Fine," Lara said, her voice tight. "Here's a genuine question. Do you ever look at the current state of Hollywood, at the young directors doing innovative work, and think maybe your time has passed? Maybe you should step aside and let fresh voices have their moment?" And there it was. The question that would become the breaking point. The audience was silent. Michael Strawn closed his eyes briefly, knowing this was not going to end well. Robin Roberts looked down at her notes, unable to watch what was about to unfold. Clint's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A decision being made. A line being drawn. "Is that what you think you're doing?" he asked quietly. "Representing fresh voices? Speaking for the next generation?" "I'm asking you a question," Lara said. "No," Clint said. "You're trying to push me into saying I'm finished. You're trying to get me to validate your obvious belief that I don't belong here anymore. Well, I'm not going to do that. Not because I'm arrogant, but because I don't believe it's true. And more importantly, I don't believe you get to decide when someone else's career should end." "I'm not trying to decide anything," Lara protested. "Yes, you are," Clint said. "That's been the entire point of this interview. You've decided I'm past my prime, and you invited me here to make me admit it on national television. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's not going to happen." The tension in the studio was now almost unbearable. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of this increasingly uncomfortable exchange. Robin Roberts looked at Lara, silently pleading with her to back down, to steer the interview in a different direction. But Lara's pride wouldn't let her. Clint took a breath, maintaining his composure. "I don't measure my relevance by box office numbers alone. I make films that I believe in, that say something worth saying. That's always been my approach." "That's very noble," Lara said, her tone dripping with condescension. "But at some point, don't you think it becomes vanity? Holding on to this career when maybe, just maybe, your time has passed?" Michael Strawn looked like he wanted to crawl under the desk. "Lara, I don't think... I'm just asking the questions everyone's thinking," Lara said. "Someone has to." Clint's eyes narrowed. "Is that what you think you're doing? Asking brave questions?" "I'm doing my job as a journalist," Lara replied. "A journalist," Clint repeated slowly. "I've been interviewed by real journalists. People who ask thoughtful questions, who are interested in actual conversation. This isn't journalism. This is you trying to create a moment at my expense." Lara's face flushed. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Clint said, his voice steady but firm. "From the moment I sat down, you've been trying to provoke me. The age comments, the suggestions that I'm washed up, the dismissal of my work. This isn't an interview. It's an ambush." "I think you're being overly sensitive," Lara shot back. "If you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." Robin Roberts finally found her voice. "Clint, I apologize if..." "Don't apologize for her," Clint said, looking at Robin. "You're not the problem." He turned back to Lara. "You want to know if I think I'm still relevant? Here's your answer. I don't spend my time worrying about what people like you think. I make films because I have stories to tell. I've earned the right to do that through decades of hard work and dedication to the craft. I don't need validation from someone who thinks asking insulting questions makes them a serious interviewer." The color drained from Lara's face. "How dare you? How dare I?" Clint's voice rose slightly, though he never lost control. "How dare you invite me onto your show under the pretense of a respectful conversation and then spend the entire time trying to tear me down. What did you think would happen? That I would just sit here and smile while you insult my life's work? Michael Strawn attempted to mediate. Let's all take a breath here. Maybe we can... No, Clint said, holding up a hand. I don't think we can. I've been in this industry for over 60 years. I've worked with the best. I've been directed by legends, and I've directed films that people still watch and talk about. I don't need to justify my existence to anyone, especially not on a morning talk show. Lara's voice took on a defensive edge. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I was simply trying to have an honest conversation about the reality of aging in Hollywood. An honest conversation? Clint shook his head. You weren't interested in honesty. You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted a viral moment. Well, congratulations. You got one. I think you're being incredibly rude, Lara said, her voice rising. I'm the host of this show. You don't get to come here and attack me. Attack you? Clint's voice remained level, but there was steel beneath it. I'm simply responding to your attacks. That's not the same thing. I haven't attacked anyone, Lara protested. I asked legitimate questions about your career trajectory. No, you made judgments, Clint corrected. You told me I was out of touch. You said my films don't connect with audiences. You suggested I should retire. Those aren't questions. Those are statements dressed up as questions. Lara crossed her arms. Well, I'm sorry if the truth hurts. The audience gasped audibly at that. Even some of the camera. Operators shifted uncomfortably behind their equipment. The truth, Clint repeated, shaking his head slowly. You think you're delivering truth? Let me tell you something about truth. Truth requires knowledge. It requires understanding. It requires respect for the subject you're discussing. What you've been doing here is none of those things. Oh, please, Lara scoffed. Don't lecture me about journalism. Someone should, Clint said, because what you're doing here isn't it. Real journalists do their homework. They know their subject. They ask questions designed to illuminate, not humiliate. Michael Strawn leaned forward. Maybe we should all just... No, Michael, Clint said, his tone gentle when addressing him. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this needs to be said. Your colleague here needs to understand that you can't treat people this way, regardless of how famous you are or how big your platform is. Lara's eyes flashed with anger. You're one to talk about platforms. You've been in Hollywood for decades. You've had every advantage. And now you're sitting here acting like you're being victimized because I asked you a few direct questions. Direct questions, Clint said. Is that what we're calling it now? Let me ask you something, Lara. When you booked me for this interview, what did you tell your producers you wanted to accomplish? Lara hesitated. I wanted to have an honest conversation about your legacy. Really? Clint's eyebrows raised. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you wanted to make a name for yourself by taking down someone you thought would be an easy target. An older man who would just sit there and take whatever you dished out. That's not fair, Lara said, but her voice wavered. Isn't it? Clint pressed. Think about your questions. Every single one was designed to diminish me, to suggest I'm past my prime, irrelevant, hanging on too long. You weren't exploring my legacy. You were trying to bury it. Robin Roberts finally found the strength to intervene more forcefully. Clint, I want you to know that this isn't how we normally conduct interviews here. We have tremendous respect for you and your work. I know you do, Robin, Clint said, and his expression softened when he looked at her. I can see that.